good afternoon and welcome to the latest Planet IT webinar. Today we have something very special for you, as we will be showing you how web apps and Microsoft 365 accounts can be compromised, including a live phishing attack and multi-factor authentication bypass. And afterwards we will talk about how you can protect yourselves against these attacks. For those of you who do not know who Planet IT are, I will quickly go over what we can offer and help with. As you can see from these areas, we can do anything from sourcing hardware or licensing, right through to providing the outsourced expertise to design, implement and support almost any solution within your infrastructure. We specialise in both on-premise infrastructure and cloud services and can help you with anything you need. We are an ever-growing company and we benefit from having some brilliant engineers and technical minds to be able to give you the best service and solutions in the industry. In case you don't know me, my name's Adam and I'm a technical architect at Planet IT. I'm cybersecurity focused and highly certified in multiple areas, and I can help you and your business work in a more secure manner. Also, I'm very lucky to have Jordan and Scott from Precursor Security with me today, and they will introduce themselves in a few minutes. At any point in this webinar, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box you should see, like this in the slide. We have a member of our team monitoring this and we will look to answer as many questions as we can at the end. And just so you know, at the end of this webinar, you'll receive an email with a short 5-question survey. Now, please be honest. We appreciate the feedback, whether it's good or bad. You'll also receive a link to this recording. This webinar is currently being recorded. So if you want to go back and look at something again, don't feel like you have to take notes while you're watching. You'll get a link so you can watch the recording back. And also, everyone who attends this webinar and fills out the survey will be entitled to a free Cyber Essentials flight check. So Cyber Essentials, if you don't already know, is the standard in cybersecurity certifications. If you don't already have it, you should definitely be on your way to getting it. And a flight check will do a review of your OSs and their support status. So, for example, Windows 7 are completely out the window now. What network protection you have, what policies and procedures you have in place, how you manage your BYOD devices, and more. Normally, these go for $199, but if you, as an attendee, and if you fill out the survey, you're entitled to one of these for free. So reach out to your account manager after the webinar to organise. So we all know why we're here. We want to see the compromisation of 3 separate areas, and what we're going to be looking at is a web app compromise, how web applications can be compromised, and what you can do to help. We're going to be seeing a Microsoft 365 account being phished in real time. And also we're going to see how a multi-factor authentication is bypassed. And I have to tell you, it's pretty scary to see how quickly that happens. So now I'm going to pass over to Jordan and Scott from Precursor Security.
Thanks, Adam. That's a really bad picture of me. I'm here with Jordan, who's our ethical hacker. He's one of our test leads.
Hello.
And I'm Scott Cardo. I'm the managing director at Precursor.
Yeah, and as Scott says, I'm Jordan, and I'm one of the testers here at Precursor.
So I know some people on the call have worked with us a few times, but for those of you who've never worked with us, a quick intro. We're cybersecurity specialists. We've been around for heading towards 5 years now. You can see some of the certifications we've got on screen in front of you. So we're a CREST member company. That's a Council of Registered Ethical Security Testers. We're a member company. All our testers are CREST registered as well. We are ISO 27001 and 9001. We've been through that pain a few times now. We are current commercial service supplier. We are a trusted partner of the NEBRC. What else? We're an IASME certified Cyber Essentials certification body, so we can assess organisations and allocate the certificates if appropriate, if you meet the standards. And we are ourselves, of course, are also Cyber Essentials Plus certified. That's a very blue screen. Some of the services that we provide, a real specialism, I guess, is penetration testing. That's what our reputation, at least initially, was built on. And you can see there some of the things we do: API assessments, application assessments, server build reviews, mobile laptop build reviews, firewall checks, social engineering, phishing assessments. I think Adam's going to speak more about phishing later in the session. Technology solutions. I mean, between ourselves and Planet, there's probably a real good coverage across any kind of defence in depth you want to apply to your organisation from a solutions perspective. Compliance testing, I mentioned before about Cyber Essentials. We can do that. We can also do PCI and IT health checks if those are things that your organisation needs. Security training, we can do that, and automation is something we're really keen on as well. So a few years back, penetration testing was a sort of single point in time exercise for organisations, but I think more and more people are aware that given the state of the world and the rate of attack, there has to be a continuous aspect to what we do now. So we work hard, and I've created a few solutions and worked with a few vendors around applying a continuous aspect to what we do via automation.
Jordan, sorry to interrupt your flow. I don't think you're sharing your screen.
Brilliant. Got it.
Great start, right? No, the slides are coming from mine.
Go.
There you go. Right, sorry about that, guys. Crack on.
It's all right. We've got 100% record every time we mess something up, so keeping the tradition.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah. Web application compromises. I think Adam mentioned we're going to talk about two things today from our perspective: web app compromises and some MFA. So one of the kind of misconceptions that we come across quite frequently at the minute is people have moved to the cloud and they've moved their apps, their web apps, into the cloud, be it AWS, Azure, or whatever else, from their sort of more traditional hosting aspects. And there's an assumption that that means they're automatically inheriting all the goodies that come with Azure and AWS from a security perspective. And there's loads of good stuff in both of those, for example, but a lot of them have to be configured. And an important aspect of this is if you've got a web application that's inherently insecure, wherever it's hosted, wherever you move it to, you're not really going to increase security around that, because the vulnerabilities you're just going to take with you. And you can see from the stats on screen there, so attacks are increasing sort of tail end of last year by 22% every quarter on web apps. And the reason for that is there's money there for the criminals. A lot of attack chains, a lot of kill chains, as we refer to them, start with a web application. Now, the statistic on screen is 50% data breach start with a web app. That might be a little pessimistic from this report, but certainly a huge percentage of everything that goes wrong for people can start with a web application. So I wanted to just start with some information and a little demo around web apps. What you can see now, hopefully, is the OWASP top 10. OWASP being the Open Web Application Security Project. It's an open source community, essentially, that looks at improving security around web applications. So what you can see there is the top 10 most critical vulnerabilities, flaws in web applications, if you like. Some of them, I mean, you've got the 2017 version, the 2021 version on side there. You can see some of the movements, and actually there's a new one as well. SSRF, just at the bottom on the right hand side there, server-side request forgery, which we'll try and demonstrate briefly to you in a minute. But if you look at some of the ones that are on there, XSS, for example, cross-site scripting, that's actually been around since the 1990s, and it's never actually left, I don't believe, the top 10. And yet there's not a week goes by when we're testing a web app when we don't find at least one instance of that. And it's not because it's difficult to mitigate, but it's pretty simple to reintroduce is a lot of the problem, especially if you're making changes to your web apps frequently. And the more complex your web application becomes, the more user roles, the more functionality you add, the more additional plugins you add to your web app, all of that increases risk, which can't always be picked up with a vulnerability scanner. Now, I mentioned automation earlier. Vulnerability scanners would fall into the area of automation, but they can't find everything, they don't find everything. That's where we come in on top. The human element of a qualified, skilled, ethical hacker on top of anything automated we add. That's where it really drives out the nuances from a security perspective. I mean, if companies like Google and Twitter are paying huge bug bounties to ethical hackers, theoretically, that's because they've got huge security budgets. They've got every scanner you can think of, but they know they still need that human element to try and find where the more nuanced stuff exists. SSRF, which I'm going to hand over to Jordan shortly to have a look at, that it's new to the top 10, and I think OWASP themselves said it's not the most frequently exploited vulnerability, but the impact of it can be significant. An example of that would be Capital One, the American bank from a couple of years back. Their particular breach, it's thought, started with an SSRF vulnerability, and that resulted in 140,000 social security numbers and 80,000 bank accounts being released to the dark web. And actually, in the end, it cost Capital One estimates somewhere around $100 million, somewhere up to $150 million to get through it all. So really painful. Okay, Hackme Data Limited. So Hackme Data Limited is our fictitious organisation that we've built. Precursor built it, and we built it for a couple of reasons. We use it for demo purposes, like we're going to do today, and we also use it for internal testing. Now, Hackme Data, we built to represent a kind of average organisation these days from a tech stack perspective. So it's got an on-prem element to it. It's got AWS, it's got Azure, it's got Office 365, and so when we do sort of all day live hacking events and security seminars, having that test organisation, if you like, is really useful, and that's what we're going to use today, because we can apply vulnerabilities to the web application, so we can show you the sorts of things that can happen. So I'll hand over to Jordan now to talk a little bit more about SSRF. We won't get too technical because we've only got 1 hour. We can go really technical on our all-day events, which I think we're planning one with Planet anyway, so keep an eye out for that. And if you are technically interested, then we can get some real detail on a full day. Over to you, Jordan.
Cheers, Scott. Let's see if I can not mess this one up now. All right, so as Scott said, we've got Hackme Data. This is the web app in front of you, pretty traditional sort of website, bit of a download brochure, guaranteed to make you feel less secure the moment you put it down. It's got all the normal features here, some register, login, contact us, bit of search engine, probably a portfolio here. And this is actually the bit we're going to focus on. But what I want to start with is actually just defining what server-side request forgery is in sort of simple terms. And what it is essentially, it is making someone's website or someone's web server or a backend server start making web requests to something that you specify as an attacker. So we'll just dive right in and show you. That's probably the easiest way. As Scott said, this is how Capital One were owned, and we do a full demo of all of this at our all-day events. So we'll just try and keep this sort of brief and quick and really show you how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to use it to take over an AWS account where this Hackme Data is hosted. This is a web server hosted on an EC2 instance that's a member of someone's AWS environment. So quickly, just to demo what actually happens here, and I'll just have to turn on my proxy, is when you hit the download button, the website goes off and it makes a request that looks like this. It download file brochure.pdf. We're downloading a PDF. And then you go ahead and that PDF downloads. What this lets an attacker do, though, is if we start putting URLs into where this file is, this is insecurely handled on the server side or the application side, and it goes off and gets our URL instead of just going and getting that brochure from an S3 bucket. Now, the IP address you can see in front of you, there's a thing in AWS called a metadata URL. We won't go into the complexities of it, but basically it lets us recover things from the AWS environment, and it's meant to be used only internally. So if we send this request here, you can see to the metadata endpoint, we don't get a PDF back, we get all of these dates back. So that means we're able to make the server do requests on our behalf, and we can see the response. So we just add some stuff to this, like the IAM here, and you can see there are some security credentials available, which are attached to the EC2 instance. We can see that's an S3 bridge here, and then we make one more request here. And what you can see here is you've got the access token, the secret key, and the token for that role effectively in AWS. We can now start using this to act as that role, as part of that AWS environment. We can take over things, we can read things, we can privilege escalate if we need to. And, you know, worst case scenario, we pretty much take over that entire AWS account. And I just want you to see there how like simple that is. It's 4 requests. It takes seconds to do. And if people like Capital One are vulnerable to this with their giant security budgets, you'd hope. It just shows how like prevalent that can really be. And I know some of you are sat there thinking that some more techs amongst you are probably thinking, well, that's using the V1 metadata API and the V2 exists to kind of mitigate this. Well, you're right, it does exist, but because of backwards compatibility, right, they can't just turn off V1. So the chances are, you know, this is probably still live on your environment. But they're just, again, a really quick demo of a server-side request forgery and how it fundamentally works. So I'll just jump back to this now and hand back over to Scott for our next demo. Yep.
Cheers, John. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that showed from one of the OWASP top 10, a new one, SSRF, sort of some of the things that can happen. So when we're testing web apps, which is actually, I'd guess, probably the majority of what we test in an average week, we would start with the OWASP top 10 for obvious reasons. These are critical vulnerabilities. We walk through them, and I would suggest probably over 50% of it, anything we ever test, we get at least one of those OWASP top 10 in a web app. And actually even in some large organizations that you would expect better of, sometimes we're playing OWASP top 10 bingo, you know, literally one after the other. So definitely worth getting a pen test if your web app's critical to your business, which it is for lots of us. So back to Hack Me Data then. One of the things that MFA is going to talk about in a minute with Jordan and then later with Adam is the prevalence of phishing as a security threat, and it's probably one of the most obvious and damaging ways which an attacker will seek to initially get a foothold and initially compromise an organisation. We've all heard of phishing. It's not going away. It's getting worse. So we really need to try and get a hold on it if we can, and we need that defence in depth. We need to have multiple layers to stop a complete compromise. In Hack Me Data, we've got, I said, it's a fictitious organisation we use for training. We've got our new starter on there on LinkedIn. His name is Victor Timothy, or Victim for short, and he is new to Hack Me Data, and so the reason I brought this slide on screen is something that's happening relatively frequently now. People are recruiting. I know this came up from one of our clients a couple of weeks ago. They're recruiting 15 people, I think it was, and they were doing the induction on the Monday, and people updated their LinkedIn to say, you know, we've now started at organisation XYZ. Everyone's saying congratulations. Of course, the bad guys are watching all this as well, and so before the 15 people who had been inducted had a chance to go through the phishing training with the new organisation, they were receiving emails from supposedly the MD welcoming them to the organisation and asking them to open up the PDF that he'd attached, which was their welcome pack to the organisation. And then, you know, from there on, had they clicked on that, it would have been a sorry tale, a sorry start to the whole new organisation, new start.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as well, just to mention the speed that this was happening, because it was in like 10-15 minutes of them updating their LinkedIn profile. It does suggest that the attackers have got some level of automation there, and things are happening like really quick, which is just quite an interesting point to note. Okay,
so now moving forward into MFA, conscious of time's ticking. So I want to start by saying multi-factor authentication is a really good thing. So, you know, whatever we show you now, if you have MFA, please use it. Switch it on whenever possible. It mitigates, Microsoft themselves say it mitigates 99% of automated attacks against credentials. that's probably true. So switch it on if you've got it. It's well worth at least getting rid of that low-hanging fruit from what is often not a difficult change. Okay, so let's have a look now at what Jordan might be able to do with MFA.
Sweet. All right. So yeah, as Scott said, I really just want to stress again, like if you've got MFA, turn it on. The headache that users are going to complain about is worth way less than the benefits you're going to gain. Let them complain. People don't like change, but honestly, it's one of the best things you can do, really. And as Microsoft said, 99.9% of cred stuff in attacks and stuff like that are going to be protected against. So it's probably worth mentioning that what is so misunderstood about MFA, and that's that people think it's a silver bullet that does protect them from everything, and because they've turned on MFA, great, they can scrap their security budget, they can fire their security team because no one's ever going to hack them. It's absolutely wrong, and it's worth just going over now what MFA helps against and what it doesn't help against. So it doesn't fix everything, and as we're going to see in a second, a determined attacker, it's almost trivial, it becomes at a point. But what it does help against is the fact that, and we're all guilty of this at some point in our lives, at least, let's be honest, that you use one password for like multiple accounts. So your PayPal might at some point have used the same password as your Facebook, as your Canva, as like a million other things. And what MFA is really good for is in the criminal market, if someone hacks a database, they just leak it or sell it, and then suddenly everyone has a list of a combo list, it's called, of emails and passwords. They then just take those emails and passwords of probably a few thousand people out of a database, stick them into an automated tool, and just try them against everything. So take the username and password, try it against PayPal, eBay, Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, LinkedIn, and just rattle through them. Take you an evening with a few residential proxies, no problem. What MFA is really good for is stopping that becoming an issue. So if someone loses a set of creds, or someone is reusing credentials, well, it doesn't matter to a degree, because the attacker, he might have the creds, but he doesn't have, for say, the mobile phone that lets him access the account. And that's what MFA is really good for. And that's where it blocks a lot of these automated attacks that are just taking creds that they know work somewhere and trying them in portals. But what we're going to see here again is that MFA isn't the fix-all bullet, that it is kind of sold to be. No, like I say, it's great. Turn it on if you've got it. So what we're going to do here anyway is we're just going to jump over to here. So let's say we've got an email, and someone like Victor Timothy earlier, he's got an email saying, hey, can you just log in and check out this CFO report? Here's a link to the report in OneDrive. Just go and check it out. So he goes over to that link, which you can see on the screen here, and he starts to log in. So bit of Victor Timothy at hackmedata.com. Yeah, job's a good one. Starts logging in. He's got a pretty secure password, so he's not too worried about cred stuff in. It's probably from a password manager. It's random. He's not using it anywhere else, so he's feeling kind of confident. He goes ahead. He signs in. Don't want to save that. So what you can see on the screen here, and what's actually in front of me now, is the Microsoft Authenticator app has just popped up saying, can you approve your sign-in? He's signing in like he expects this, so he goes ahead and approves it. I use the Face ID, all the biometrics, all the bells and whistles to approve that, and he goes ahead and signs in. And he's in his 365 environment, right? I know I'm in dark mode, but he's got all his bits here, all his files, nothing really out of the ordinary. But if we look at what happened from an attacker's perspective there, he's just captured his password and his email, but as we know, he's using MFA, so, not too bad. But what has happened here is he's captured his session token. So if I could type, what we've got here is the cookie that Microsoft issued him. And as an attacker, we can just copy and paste this off our web server that we use to man in the middle of connection. We can jump over to this one. Yep. And I'll just turn off my proxy real quick so we can show you. And we'll go over to the actual Office page here, right? And we're not logged in. I'll just refresh it to show you we're not logged in, sign in. But we can just go ahead and import that cookie with some off-the-shelf cookie importer thing. And then fingers crossed, we click this button and it doesn't work because I'm an idiot. Just import that again. refresh this. We should have access. There we go. We've got access to Victor Timothy's office environment as him, even though he was using MFA and a pretty secure password, all just through that little complex phishing attack. Well, not so complex, but you get what I'm saying. So what I wanted to do as well here was, I've got a little pre-recorded video of me doing this again, is just show you how quickly this can kind of go wrong in real time. And I wanted to use a video because having the multiple screens set up and everything can be a bit messy. So we'll just run through this. So the attacker on the right in this box over here, the black box, the terminal, is the attacker's computer, and our Victor Timothy is on the left, and he's going to be the victim. And we're just going to see this unfold into a bit of a ransomware attack within the space of 2 minutes. So you can see on the left there, he's got an email saying, "Hi Vic, can you check out the new CFO report on OneDrive? That'd be ideal. There's a link here. Cheers." So he's got that email there. Yeah, all right, I can do that. He's in a bit of a rush. Goes ahead, clicks it, gets sent to the phishing page. Yeah, happy days. Just log in. And you can see on the right here that the attacker's kind of already monitoring what's going on. So he goes ahead, signs in with his secure password. Yeah, all good. At this time, I was using the SMS code. So just types in the SMS code because he knows he's got two-factor. Job's a good one. Sign in. Okay. And as you can see on the left here, he just got force downloaded a finance report. On the right, the attacker's just intercepted everything, so they can go ahead and start using his account. But Vic on the left here, he's going to go because he's been asked to open this report, and he opens the report. And what you can see here is everything starts going terribly, terribly wrong. Bit of ransomware executes from a macro in his Word document. You can see on his desktop there, all his files are encrypted, and it probably starts propagating around the network and yeah, causing a bit of a panic. On the right here as well, though, you can see at the same time the attacker can go ahead. He can, again, apparently I can't type, but he can go ahead, copy the cookie and start using his 365, start exfiltrating documents, backdooring more documents, stealing data, doing whatever he really wants. All of this in the space of what, minute and 20 seconds there. It's all going terribly wrong for old Vic. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking as well, that was a macro. So if I just, like, macros won't auto run, so I'm safe. Well, I guarantee you, I'll put a $5 on someone in your finance department has got macros enabled for spreadsheets or Word docs because it just helps them do their job. And if you don't, just go and have a look at your finance department because I bet you'll find at least one person who's enabled macros. But like as I say, the attacker's now on the right hand side while Vic and his IT team are panicking on the left hand side, and he's stealing data, taking documents. He's using that email account to then email Vic's other contacts and trying to propagate to other businesses with the same attack, all within the space of like 2 minutes. So one of the things I want you to take away from this is, if you turn on MFA, you still need everything else. That defense in depth approach, as we say, is really important. And please rehearse what's going to happen in your organization if this happens to you. Too many times people don't really have a plan, and they just kind of try and think, oh, well, it'll never happen to me, and then it does happen to them, and everyone's panicking, and when the red mist sets in and everyone's in a frenzy, no one knows what to do. So go away, think about what you would do as a company, and give it a little rehearsal and a dry run to say, okay, if this happened to us, sit down and again at a table and work out really what you would do, because it might happen and it'll happen really quick. But that's just a quick demonstration there I wanted to give you. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'm just gonna hand back to Scott, who will wrap it up for us.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, so just in summary then, SSRF, quick demo there. That's one of obviously the OWASP top 10 that we talked about. We're going to do future events with Planet. We can go through others. An MFA bypass. As Jordan said, it's a good thing. MFA, it's a really good thing, but it's not the be all and end all. You do need defense in depth. You do need to think about your response rehearsals and your response playbook. I'm going to hand over to Adam now, and he will continue.
Sorry, just juggling sharing screen and unmuting. There we go. Yeah, well, I mean, that was pretty eye-opening, I think you'll find. So yeah, what was the first one we looked at? The first one was a web application compromise. So I'm going to talk to you about how we can secure against all of these kind of things that we've just seen. And to learn how to secure your web app, we kind of need to understand a little bit about the shared responsibility model, which is what we're going to go through now. Now, the examples I have here, I mean, my terminology is based around Microsoft Azure because that's what I know, but the same principle can apply to AWS or G Cloud or any other as a service effectively. So what we want to look at really first is your on-premise setup. So this would be effectively physical servers, physical network in a server room, either in your building or in a data center somewhere. Now, of course, you're responsible for keeping those servers online, keeping them up to date, the operating systems on those servers, the data that's on those servers, the devices that are accessing them, and all of this kind of stuff, and it all down to the authentication. And when you're thinking about securing a web app, presumably then your web app is going to be hosted on like an IIS server or an Apache server that is sitting on your network. So I'm not going to talk about hardening the app as such because we're not going to get into the code of it. But if you've got your web app hosted on site, there are solutions such as your Edge firewall that will protect that web app. Perhaps not as well as if it was hosted elsewhere, but you can protect it from the firewall level. Next, let's look at infrastructure as a service. So using the Azure example, that we're looking at virtual machines here and storage accounts. So of course, with Microsoft Azure and the infrastructure as a service model, things like the data center, the network and the hosts, you don't have access to any of that. Not many people even know where the data centers are. But they will provide you the means to create a virtual machine, just like you would on VMware or Hyper-V on your on-premise example. But from that level onwards, so the operating system, the applications, the data, the directory infrastructure, permissions, all of this kind of stuff is on you to protect. It's your responsibility to make sure that it's all good. So similarly to the on-premise example, you can stick a firewall, it'll be a virtual firewall up in Azure, and that'll be effectively on the virtual edge. And that will also, if configured correctly, protect the web application. They call it a web application firewall. Next, we're going to talk about platform as a service. So the Azure example here would be the app service or the managed SQL instance, or just think along those lines, where Microsoft won't give you access to the operating system behind the scenes. They already have network controls in place in the application as well. They will provide you with these. The same with the identity. You know, they provide you with Azure AD in this example, but it's on you to configure those network controls, for example. So you're looking at the application as well. They'll provide you with the application, but you need to make sure, for example, the SQL Management Studio is up to date and that your permissions within Azure AD is all as it should be. And then software as a service, think Office 365, Outlook. Obviously, the infrastructure behind that, so your Exchange servers that they have hosted somewhere in their infrastructure, you don't have access to any of that. But what you do have access to is the accounts. So think Office 365 usernames, and you control the devices that access it, but you can also control the accounts and the permissions, whereas they provide you with the means to do that. Just a brief explanation about the shared responsibility model to help you understand where you would need to protect your web app if it was hosted in Azure. Now, our second example, which was merged in really with the third example, which was obviously MFA, but the second example being a phishing attack. Now, these are the most successful most successful attacks around at the moment, and the reason being is because it relies on the end user to click a link. So the bad actor, all they really need to do is convince the user that it's a genuine email. You need to click here, you need to put your credentials in, and that's it. They've got their credentials. And as we saw, and as we'll talk about next, a talented hacker can bypass the MFA part of that. So we can talk about how to spot a phishing attack, but it's also worth mentioning that a lot of you here should already have, in fact, everyone should have an email security gateway. So you can think Barracuda or Sophos or Mimecast, something along those lines, where it effectively acts as a barrier between the outside world and your email server. And if it's decent enough, it will, not 100% because nothing's 100%, but it will generally, it will filter out those phishing emails. It will see what an email looks like to be phishing. It'll put it in quarantine. So let's have a look at how to spot a phishing attack. So check the from address. If it's really from Microsoft or Apple, it's going to be apple.com or microsoft.com. A lot of the time, people that send you these emails, they'll either do it from a free account, such as this is an MSN account, or it will be from someone else's compromised email server. So check the from address. Is it from Microsoft or is it from someone who's pretending to be Microsoft? As I say, the bad guys, they want their user to click the link. They want you to click a URL in the email. So have a look at that URL. Hover your mouse over it to see what the link actually is. And you can see in this example that it's clearly not Microsoft. If it was Microsoft, it would be Microsoft.com or something similar. Worth noting at this point, if you have an email security gateway in place, a lot of them have a URL rewrite feature where instead of being the actual URL, it will be something like protect.mimecast or protect.barracuda, something like that. And then when you click it, it will see if it's a genuine website or not, and it will help you there. But that's the second tip. On to the next. What's the tone of the email? Is there any urgency in it? Are they trying to get you to do something? Like, act before it's too late. You need to do this now. The email generally is sent with high importance as well. Don't forget, the hacker, they want you to click that link and they want your credentials. That's the number one point of all of this. So if there's an urgency in the tone, generally that's a red flag as well. Unexpected sender or subject. Well, have you just bought something from Dell using PayPal? Possibly not. If you're not expecting the email, if you're not expecting something from these guys, if the subject doesn't look familiar, then it's probably not a genuine email. The same goes for the attachment. If an unexpected email comes through and it has a funny attachment, like a lot of people on this call are IT proficient, and we can see straight away that that's obviously a dodgy looking attachment, but your end users maybe not so much. Also worth mentioning that we haven't highlighted it in this slide, but this receipt is for over 17 grand. So I'm fairly sure that you'd know if you just spent 17 grand. But again, just like the last one, if you're not expecting it, it's probably not genuine. What does the language look like? So it's worth noting that where these attacks come from, normally from non-English speaking countries, or at least the English is the second language. So you tend to find the grammar, the spelling, things like you can see here, the iTunes, it's not in the correct format that you'd expect it to be. It's not up to scratch, and you can bet your bottom dollar that if this was a genuine email from Apple, everything would be perfect. They would make sure that it's the grammar and the spelling, and obviously their brand as well would be up to scratch. And sticking on branding as well, Apple, Microsoft, all the big guys, they spend a lot of money on branding and marketing and advertising and whatnot. Okay, in our example, the login page actually looked pretty genuine, but there's still a lot of these out there where the landing page looks like it's just been put together. You can bet if this was Microsoft, it will be branded Microsoft. You know, everything will be perfect. Again, they are selling themselves. Any website you go to will be branded properly. So if you come across a landing page like this, then you know it's clearly not right. And finally, if it's asking you to log in and you're not expecting so, then you know it's clearly not a genuine email. Just something I picked up on Jordan's demo earlier. The URL of the sign-in page was definitely not a phishingattack.com or something similar. if you come across a landing page like that, check the URL. Is it actually Microsoft.com or Office.com, something like that? Or is it definitely not a phishingscam.com? So the third attack, which was kind of rolled into the phishing, but the multi-factor authentication bypass that we saw, I mean, I know I keep saying it, but I found it quite scary how quickly and easily someone with the right talent, determination and tools can get into your account. Now, I'll piggyback on what Scott and Jordan said. You know, multi-factor authentication is brilliant. If you haven't got it enabled, you really should do, because in 365 per user MFA, it's free. So why wouldn't you have it? But it's not the be all and end all. It's as we've seen, you know, someone with the right determination will be able to bypass it. So this is where conditional access comes in. Now, multi-factor authentication, it is still a piece of that puzzle. It's still a very big piece of the conditional access solution, but conditional access looks at other things. So conditional access will take the login information, such as the user and the location. So are they in the UK or not, for example, the device. So you can specify, is it a Windows device? Is it a Mac device, or is it a Linux device? And also, is it compliant within Intune or endpoint protection, or endpoint manager, sorry. What application are you using, or what application are you trying to access? And also, conditional access, risk-based conditional access will look at the risk. So even if you haven't specified those signals in your policies, it will still look at those things and make a decision on the risk. And you can say block high-risk users or high-risk sign-in attempts. So if we take the example of a genuine user, they're coming from a Windows machine that's compliant in Intune, they're coming from somewhere in the UK, and they're using an approved application, and therefore they're a low risk. They will then be put onto the multi-factor authentication part, where they'll have to meet the challenge. And once they pass that, they will then get access to the applications and the data that they need to. However, if we take the Precursor example, I don't know, you probably noticed, but Precursor was using a Mac, and there's also the Linux element to that as well. So if they're using a Linux machine, if they're coming from another country like Morocco or whatever, or if their real-time risk is high, it won't even get as far as multi-factor authentication. It will block that access there and then. So that's just a very quick once over, a quick explanation on conditional access and how you can pair it with multi-factor authentication to secure your environment. So the value of Cyber Essentials. So I mentioned it very briefly at the beginning. Cyber Essentials is the standard when it comes to cyber security certifications. So if you have the Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, then what you're saying to the world is, I'm secure, I've put the controls in place and the security in place to pass the Cyber Essentials. And what benefit does that give you? Well, it will give you the customers. So a lot of customers out there, they require Cyber Essentials as a minimum before inviting you to tender. The same goes for the government. The absolute minimum they will want is Cyber Essentials Plus, as well as your ISO 27001s and everything like that. If you have the Cyber Essentials, then the security and policies you've put in place decrease your likelihood of attack by 80%, purely by the fact that you've put these controls in place. The fines that come with data leaks, you will avoid that, because the mitigation is you've got your Cyber Essentials certification and the protections that come with it. And as I say, it is the standard when it comes to cyber security certifications. It is the first one you should really be doing. If you don't already have it, you really should be on the road to getting it done. And let's look at a very quick, I'm very conscious of the time because we've only got 15 minutes left, but a quick look at the security stack, how we can help you and how you can help secure all the aspects of what you've just seen. So as we saw, our Victor Timothy, or Victim, you see what we did there, he got hit by ransomware because he opened up a malicious attachment. If you have sufficient endpoint protection, such as your Sophos or anything else like that, you'll be protected against the ransomware. Same goes for the email security gateway. If you've got an email security gateway in place and it is a sufficient one, it will filter out the majority of these attacks because it will be able to see straight away it's from a malicious source, or the content of the email is obviously trying to send you to a link. Also, a URL rewrite feature is a good thing. Encryption, well, you should already be encrypting your laptops as a bare minimum with BitLocker or FileVault, depending on the OS native solution you choose. Obviously, there's third-party tools out there that help you manage that. With the firewall and web filterings, we touched on this a little bit in the shared responsibility model. If you've got an edge firewall, it's going to not only help protect your web servers, it will also, when someone clicks that link, it will know that that's actually a bad URL. It's going to a malicious place, and it will stop the user from going there. Phishing awareness or cyber awareness testing and training. You can get these packages, whether it be from Barracuda or Sophos or KnowBe4. KnowBe4 is obviously a very well known one, where they will send out test campaigns to your end users. You'll get the reports on who's clicked the link and who's opened the emails, all that kind of stuff. And then they are sent on training to say, this could have been a phishing attack, so you need to do this. And it's not long training, but it's sufficient. Excuse me. And finally, tailored reports. So Planet IT can do a wide range of health checks or security reports, right through from Office 365 health checks, right through to platinum security checks, where we will check every security solution in your infrastructure, in your environment, and make sure that it's configured to the best practice. And Planet IT, we're vendor agnostic. You know, we work with many partners. And this is just a small portion of those that we work with today. And just a bit of self-promotion. I think it was about this time last week, wasn't it? Planet IT were awarded the Sophos MTR Partner of the Year for the entire EMEA region. Now, we were up against tens of thousands of partners, and we got it. And it's absolutely huge. So for those of you who don't know what Sophos MTR is, it's managed threat response. It's Sophos's managed SOC service. I'm not going to go into detail really because it's not really for this webinar, but it's fantastic. We stand behind it, we support it, and that's one of the reasons why we won the awards. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want to discuss this any further. And also, as I said right at the beginning, after the webinar, you're going to receive an email. It's going to have a short 5-question survey. Please fill it in and please be honest with your feedback, whether this webinar was useful or whether it's not, or if things that we can improve on or not. You'll also have a link to the recording of this webinar. So if you need to go back and review some of the content, maybe you want to see the MFA bypass live in action again, or you want to show it to other people, you're going to get that. And for those of you who are attending and also have completed the survey link, you'll be able to claim a free Cyber Essentials flight check. Like I said at the beginning, this is a report that looks at your operating systems, your network protection, policies and procedures, BYOD devices, and more, and will provide you recommendations based on what we've seen, and say that you need to do this before you can go for the Cyber Essentials. Or in a good best case scenario, no, you're all good. Crack on, get your Cyber Essentials sorted. We normally do them for $199, but if you fill in the survey, you'll be able to claim one for free. And talk to your account manager, or reach out to me if you want to, and we can discuss that a little bit further. So now we've got our Q&A session, so we'll take some questions.
Adam, I'm actually going to jump in there for a second. Unfortunately, folks, we have a technical glitch with the Q&A section. Questions are coming through, but unfortunately, we're not able to push them through to the speakers. I'm able to see them here, Adam, so I'm going to push them through to you personally. So I'll jump back off again. You can pose them to yourself and the guys at Precursor.
Okay. Cool. So let's see what's coming through. I'm going to open in my phone because otherwise I'll be sharing my Teams. You mentioned the top 10 web app threats earlier. How many of these top 10 would be found on an average web application pen test? I think that's definitely one for Precursor, I think.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, difficult one to answer definitively, but I mean, the more complex the web application, the more chance that we'll find something. But I would guess that for web applications that we test, probably 90% of them will hold something in that OWASP arena. And like I said earlier, some unfortunately hold multiple of those critical defects within. And I mean, there's lots of functional testing goes on with websites, and everyone tests it, and you get UAT and you get users on there, and it's all great. It looks fantastic. If you've got security issues, then really you need a pen test to find this stuff. We had one. We found one we got credited as an organisation with I think last year or maybe 18 months ago, which was in a plugin to a simple WordPress site, for example. So firewalls, all this sort of stuff isn't going to stop this particular instance, where one of our testers managed to escalate his privileges from a standard user to actually admin console on that particular website, and it was on an e-commerce plugin. This particular e-commerce plugin, there's millions of downloads, so that vulnerability that we found, which was actually on that top 10 list that I talked about earlier, would have been affecting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of websites. There's a blog on our website about that particular one. So I think the answer is it varies, but probably at least one.
Okay, thank you. Another one, by the looks of this, is another one for you guys. The MFA demo used biometric authenticator, or used a biometric authenticator. Why is the SMS method considered less secure?
I'll take that one if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so with SMS, it's pretty, I don't want to say archaic technology, but it's pretty old. So there are things called SS7 attacks where, I mean, a classic example of one was where two-factor was used for crypto wallets for people storing their Bitcoin. And what attackers were doing was getting from other sources, other leaks, information about these people who they wanted to steal their money. They'd then ring up the mobile company and do a SIM swap attack where they'd basically just get the SIM swapped onto one that they control. And then the attackers can reroute any two-factor SMS codes to their mobile, and just what they were doing in this example was stealing all of people's Bitcoin. But SS7 is kind of vulnerable to some attacks that make it slightly more easy to steal codes.
Cool. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Obviously, we've heard of the SMS spoofing and things like that. So yeah, thank you for that. I think this one's for me. So is conditional access included with Microsoft 365? I mean, as a feature, yes, it is, because it links in with the Azure AD side of things. In terms of licensing, now it completely depends on what you've got. So if you've got Microsoft 365 Business Basic or Business Standard, that's a no. It doesn't have that, because the Microsoft 365 Business Premium package includes Azure AD Premium P1, and P1 includes conditional access. Not risk-based conditional access, but just normal conditional access. Now, if you want risk-based conditional access, then you need the Azure AD Premium P2, which gives you a lot more as well. I'm not going to go into every bit you get with the AD Premium P2, but the answer is it depends on your license, really. It's worth noting you can buy AD P1 and P2 separately if you don't feel like you want Business Premium, but I would encourage you to consider it, because Business Premium also includes Microsoft Intune, which on its own, to me, is worth its weight in gold. Yeah, so that's that really. If you want to have a discussion about the licensing aspect of your 365, then reach out. My contact details are on the next slide. We've got another one here. Let's be honest, no matter how much we try to educate our end users, I don't trust them to spot the phishing warning signs. What can I do? So I spoke about the security stack in one of the previous slides. And the best way you can protect yourself is have kind of a layered approach. So you'll have your endpoint protection, which is effectively your last line of defense on ransomware. You got your email security gateway, which it won't it won't filter out all of them. You're never going to stop 100%. Although I have to say, us at Planet IT, we use Mimecast, and I can't remember the last time I had something come through that looked like a phishing attack. It's definitely happened, but not in the past couple of months for sure. You can also do your cyber awareness training. Now, I get the point. You know, it's some of your users, some of them are unteachable. You know, you're never going to stop all of your users from clicking that link, but you can mitigate it by doing these test campaigns and training for your users. And you know, a lot of our customers that run them through KnowBe4 or Barracuda, they're doing them monthly, and you can see the trend in the graph that by doing them monthly, they're reducing their risk because less and less users are clicking the link. And also, you've also got things like your edge firewall, which are going to protect you clicking that link and going off to a malicious website and things like that. So I guess the answer is I agree that, you know, there's some users that don't consider it, and you could probably argue that it's not their job to consider it. You know, they're hired for a purpose. So there are other things you can do in the background to help mitigate that risk. What else have we got? We've got one more by the looks of it. Is this webinar being recorded and can you send it to us? Yeah, it's like I said in a couple of the slides. Yeah, we will send this recording to all the attendees with the survey. It'll also be available on a Planet IT blog, and we'll be publishing it on social media platforms, and it'll probably end up on YouTube at some point, probably very soon. In fact, I believe that's our preferred sharing platform. So yeah, the answer is yes, you will get a link to this recording. Barry, how are we doing? Have we got any more, or are we? Is that pretty much it?
That is it. We're all good to questions.
To be fair, we've got 2 or 3 minutes left, so I think that's a wrap, guys. Thank you very much for everyone who's attended this webinar. I hope you found it insightful. I mean, I certainly did, and I've seen it before. So my contact details are on the screen. So if there's anything you want to talk about based on this webinar, if you want to discuss conditional access any further, or 365 licensing, or anything else that you want to talk about, anything that's keeping you up at night, just drop me an email and I'll quite happily respond.
Thanks, Adam. I'd just like to take this as well. Just a chance to shout out to Kay Gretzky on GitHub, who made the two-factor bypass possible with some of his tools. Credit where credit's due to him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this multi-factor authentication bypass, I mean, obviously it's not possible without the people behind the scenes that create these tools. Obviously, a lot of the times they're used maliciously, but you know, if the tools don't exist, the pen test tools don't exist, then we can't do this. And yeah, so no, I completely agree. And there we are. That's a wrap. Thank you very much for joining. And again, reach out if you've got any further questions.